Hello, welcome to us, Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This is going to be a tier list reviewing the units for the Helsmiths of Hashut, which I may, for most of the video, refer to as Chaos Dwarves, because that's what they'll always be to me. Now, I have already done a review of all of the units, which you can go back and watch in a previous video. However, that wasn't without the context of points. Now we have the points, we can really start to understand how these units may perform and also how effective these units may be. As I said in my previous video, they could point these units as either having maximum demonic power points or minimum demonic power points. If you weren't sure, and for some reason you're watching the tier list video before you watch the other video, each unit in the Helsmiths of Hashut has got the capacity to get up to 3 demonic power points to be attached to it to make them, I'm going to say quote unquote, stronger. Not necessarily the case. So were they going to point these units as having 3 demonic power points each or not having 3 demonic power points each? The receipts are in, and they have, I'm going to say, undercosted it. And now that's quite interesting because some of these units don't have a lot of utility, but being cheap or being too cheap for what they're meant to do, especially compared to other stuff in a game, is its own quality. It's its own quality, which is why I assume you'll subscribe to me on Patreon, because it's cheap and it's good quality. Thank you very much. Okay. So we are going to be looking at all of the units. We have the points. Shout out to French Wargamer, a YouTube channel in French. And here we can see a bunch of the points, which we'll go through in order. I think a lot of people were a little bit upset about the Chaos Dwarves being described as an elite army, because you can take a lot of the actual dwarfs, and so didn't feel like it was overly elite, especially when many people were thinking about, you know, if you think about Custodes for 40k, one of the great things about that is you actually don't have to buy or paint a lot of models. So elite armies, which is why I assume the horrible Mega Gargants are so popular, is because you only have to buy 4 ugly models and paint them. Rumors of which, I don't know if anyone's been listening to the rumors, apparently we have a Gargant matriarch as a rumor on the way. That's a rumor that I've heard. So OBR is another great example of an elite army that you have in Age of Sigmar, where you can just paint up quite a lot of large models and build an elite force. And Chaos Dwarves are not that, especially at these points costs. You'll note that there's only actually 2 units that even break the 200 point mark, and that is Urukar Tarr and the Demon Smith. Okay, so the tier lists that I do are based on a couple of different things. So instead of just saying S, A, or whatever, we talk about the units being the most effective in the book, and then they go down to least effective. So one of the things that we should also be talking about here is their effectiveness inside the book and their effectiveness outside of the book. So the internal balance and the external balance as a unit. Now, most of these are going to score really high straight off the bat because they are cheap. They're really, really cheap. And so that's pretty good. That's already going to put them up to a pretty good level. And most of them have a role, which is nice as well. So we're going to dive straight in. We're going to start talking about some of the units, looking at them. Let me know what you think. Obviously, in the comments below, tell me if you think I'm wrong. Obviously, that'll be really difficult for you to do, as I'm obviously going to be right. But feel free to voice your thoughts in the comments below and tell me what you think. We're going to start at a weird place with the tier list and a unit that we're going to pick to talk about, mainly because of how the army plays. If you didn't want to watch my very excellent review of the Hellsmiths, effectively, the way you generate demonic power points, which is how you power up your units, you do that via desecrating terrain or objectives, which means mobility needs to be something that is key to your army. You need to be able to go places and desecrate terrain in each hero phase. So early game, you really need to start to take what we call the mid-board, the center of the board, right? And there's a great unit that can do this in the Hobgrot Vandals. So the Hobgrot Vandals is only 70 points for 10 little fellas. Now, they're not good by any stretch of the imagination. These Hongbots, desolate, not desecrate, sorry, desolate terrain. So they've got 2 attacks each, 4s and 5s, no rend damage 1. We don't really care about that, though. What we really care about is this 5-inch movement, because they have an ability in the deployment phase, and this unit can immediately use the normal move ability as if it were your normal movement phase. This means a screen or a line of 10 Hongbots is going to be able to move 5 inches, and each unit of Hongbots is going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to move into the midboard, which means they move onto objectives. One of the ways that lots of players play is they'll put something either really light on an objective, like I don't know, 3 prosecutors is a good example, right? Then your opponent tries to charge them or tries to fight them with their big unit of 20 gooch rippers that for cruel boys. They go in, they try to give them a stab, but then you can counterattack because into that unit, right? You can set it up. So this is called trading. So Hobgrots is a great unit that you can trade for objectives in the midboard. So some of your stronger units or your shooting units can either like charge or like, you know, target in on those units as well. This is going to be especially good because several of your units are pretty slow. So if you did want to engage with them, trading feels like a good strategy. The other way, obviously, people will take objectives, you just move really solid, very scary units onto the objective and, you know, basically challenge their opponent to a big old fight. So Hobgrot Vandals give you the opportunity to do trading, but that doesn't matter as much as the fact that you are also going to be able to desolate pieces of terrain and objectives early with the Vandals, and you don't really care if they get killed because you've got 2 units, it's 140 points. Who cares? In addition, you're going to be able to screen your army. So because it's done in the deployment phase, not on the first turn, if your opponent's got a teleporting army or, you know, an Alpha Strike charging army or whatever it might be, they're going to be able to only hit the line of Hobgrot Vandals. And sure, they're going to be able to use things like power through, you know, to maybe get around them. But ultimately, those Hobgrots are going to be a vital frontline defense for what might be a very heavy shooting army or a counter-charging army. It gives you the ability to create what we call a beta strike, which many armies don't have access to. And therefore, even though they're rubbish, the utility that they bring to your army makes them one of the most effective units in your roster for 70 points. Now, of course, you can do, like, you know, take a small unit because it's not that much more expensive for one of our units of infantry and just run them in the middle of the board. They got a much better armor save. You know, they can fight a little bit better, but you're not going to be able to pre-game move them, which is crazy. So it seems like a crazy place to start, but it lets me explain how the army works and it lets me explain how you might play the army. That's a good place to take us. 70 points, bargain. Okay, so the first actual unit we're going to look at, no offense to you Hobgrots, powerhouse of the army, is the Urukar Tarr. So our character, our leader of the Helsmiths of Hashut, Urukar Tarr, the first demon smith, comes in at an incredibly competitive 350 points. A stupid cost because you get 16 health, 3-up save, is a 2-cast wizard. When you apply DPP, it gets +2 to cast and a 5-up ward save. Now, the thing that's got me already excited about Urukar Tarr, and I'm going to talk about it when we talk about the Demon Smith on Bale Taurus, is the Guruk's Horns and Hooves. So it's going to be this attack. 6 attacks. Now, they do hit on 4s, which is rubbish, but 2s, Rend 2, damage 3, +1 damage on the charge. So that's damage 4. You can easily take Urukar Tarr and like 5 Demon Smiths on Bale Tauruses. And that is a lot of monsters that get +1 damage on the charge, which are pretty fast. They move 10 inches, so kind of okay. But 16 health on 3-up save, very competitive armor save value for a 2-cast wizard with +2 to cast. I guess the main thing everyone will want me to talk about is the fact that the DPP mechanic, they're moving the points around for Master of Demonic Power. This unit is able to move them, so it's able to take off the demonic power points and put them onto another unit in the enemy hero phase, which is quite effective. You can take them off maybe your shooting unit and put them onto one of your other units for defense as an option. That probably makes them very, very effective. The points also make them very effective as well. Very, very effective. The one thing, so I'm really torn here between effective and most effective, because ultimately you can probably run armies without Urukar Tarr. I mean, he's so competitively priced, I don't see why maybe you wouldn't put Urukar Tarr in your army. It's 350 points basically for a utility. On top of that, a 2-cast wizard that's also a monster that also flies, that's also a 3-up armor save, that might also be a damage dealing piece, but isn't going to compare to our actual damage dealing pieces in the roster. So we're not really taking him for that. So it's like a sum of all the parts. But Age of Sigmar sometimes can become very singular in actually just taking a single thing many times is better than, you know, trying to diversify. So I don't think effective is right. I think ultimately most effective is right. And comparable to units outside of this book, very crazy competitively priced. So it's up there, but it's only It's only up there if you're planning on really trying to make the DPP economy work, which I don't know if you are trying to make the DPP economy work. I don't know if you're not just taking a bunch of Bull Centaur spoilers and just sending it. I don't know if you're not just, taking a million Razers and just sending it, or taking 12 Dominator engines. Like, at that point, because, and I said this before, actually, maybe I shall say this once, actually, at the start of the tier list review. The problem, and I said this during the actual review as well, the problem with this army being cheap is that you have a lot of units. Now, you're going to say, I don't mind that, Rob. I like having a lot of units, and that's okay. But the problem is that means you can only put DPP in so many places. If you did have an actual elite army, I don't know, let's say 5 units, then early game, DPP only going on to 1 unit or 2 is fine. But when you might be having 10, 11 units, actually, where your DPP goes is actually more important, and you got to really think about it, and maybe you can't actually buff your units up because some of your units aren't very good without DPP. So I've said DPP too many times. so not being an elite army causes some issues in trying to make DPP be a thing. So I think that's worth pointing out as well. So yeah, I'm going to put him in most effective, but I want there to be like a lot of asterisks around that. I kind of want to put it here, to be honest. But I think if I do put that here, you're all going to bitch. So I'm going to put him up there. Right, so our next unit is the Demon Smith on Bale Taurus. This is a monster with 15 health, 3 up save. It's only 320 points for a 1-cast wizard. Okay, fine. Now, this is really, I would say, a damage-dealing piece. The 1-cast wizard is a side note, the fact that it is a 1-cast wizard. But it does have this ability on a Holy Stampede. While friendly Helsmiths of Hashut cavalry units are wholly within 12 inches of this unit, that unit can use the retreat ability of the still, use the charge abilities in the same turn. Now, this is going to be a pretty big deal because the Bull Centaurs specifically are pretty cheap, and they also do a lot of damage. So as cavalry units for retreating and charging, you definitely want, because they get plus damage on the charge. So that feels like they combo really well together. And because the Bull Centaurs are really cheap and very effective, that means that Demon Smiths upgraded as well. Like with Urukar Tarr, you have to really make a case to me about how you're going to manage your DPP economy that's going to be so effective. So like, to me, it's more effective. You can also take heroic traits. You can also take artifacts on the Bull Centaur on Taurus. And as a list, if you were crazy, then you can take 5 of these and Urukar Tarr, and it's going to get you 1,950 points. This leaves you points for taking a manifestation law. This leaves you points for getting a free CP. And then you're going to have 5 dudes that are control 5, move 10, 3 up saves, effectively mini bloodthirsters, but cheaper. They've got, you get quite a lot of shooting out of them, even though the shooting's pretty terrible. And you'll do a lot of charge damage, and you'll also have a lot of spells. So I think that's pretty interesting. That's very fun. That one sings to me. That would be very cool. Yeah, if you were crazy, everyone's like, I am crazy, Rob. Well, there's a list for you, I think. All monsters all the time. Obviously, you could potentially drop these a little bit. You could maybe only have 4 Tauruses, take some Vandals, and then when we go and talk about it, you could take a Demon Smith on foot because he's going to be able to heal these monsters / war machines. But I'm actually going to make this guy more effective than Urukar Tarr. Now, that's a crazy choice, but it's because he has very obvious synergy, whereas you still got to make the argument for me about DPP really being effective. It's more of a it's their situation. So he's up there. FYI, 3 units are here now. I really hope my biases are coming through. Although, don't worry, we could always talk about the infantry and drop that straight down. But yeah, I'm going to say, I don't know if, I think I might have to drop both of these into effective, just to make this balance out. Maybe I'll reapproach this later to like kind of make it make more sense, because not everything can be most effective. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So anyway, that's where we're at for now. Next up, we're going to talk about the Demon Smith. 110 points for a 1-cast wizard. That's about what you pay for a wizard. This wizard, though, has 6 health and a 4 up save, which is pretty nice. Some wizards do not have that level of survivability. In addition, this unit can also heal war machines. Now, your big monsters, either your demon engines or your Bale Tauruses, are actually war machines. So you've got the capacity to heal them, which is pretty good. So they heal D3 plus X. Now, there are some stipulations. They've got to be wholly within 6 inches of the Demon Smith, and seeing as they're fast and the Demon Smith is slow, they might not be close to each other. But you can use demonic power points to extend the range of that. And when you extend the range, you also extend how much it gets healed by. So you can potentially heal 6 to a war machine in your hero phase. That's quite good. And it does not mean the enemy unit, the unit that you're healing can be in combat, where normally the main heal that you have, rally, you can't use that while you're in combat. However, even then, it's fine. Like, it combos if you're taking them. 110 points, you could just take like close to another one. I mean, when we actually talk about the Dominator engines, it's only 50 points more for an actual 10 health 2-up save guy. It's probably better to just have the 10 health 2-up save guy versus just having like this wizard. So he's fine. He's fine. He's a wizard that costs 100 points. Externally, that's what you would pay for it. Internally, it has some utility. It's fine. Next unit is a War Despot. So this guy's pretty interesting. 6 health and a 3-up save with 5 attacks, crit mortals, and the ability to give themselves +3 to their own control score, mean they're running around at control score 5. This does lead us to a very fun list where we can have, thank you to Magical Ben GT, where we can have 22 War Despots for 1,980 points, which is going to be I think it's actually 110 attacks with crit mortals. That's actually pretty good. It's also like, I don't know, 120 health on a 3-up save, which is decent. Now, the real reason you're bringing a War Despot is because of its ability to fight simultaneously with one of your infantry units. And when it does so, it's going to fight it's going to give them +1 attack. So really, it's about the effectiveness of your core infantry units, which is what you're going to have got in your box if you picked up the FOMO box. So the cohorts, so you got the option to go there. And because this ability is not locked once per turn army, you can actually have multiple War Despots, and you can also have multiple infantry blocks chain fighting, which I think is pretty exciting. These units cannot make themselves chain fight because it says friendly non-hero Hellsmiths, so you can't do that. However, your infantry units are pretty slow. Unlike other armies, though, you have the ability to put on ranged pressure or increase the tempo of how the game plays out. As an example, if my opponent has shooting and I don't, they can just shoot at me and I have to rush forward at them. Otherwise, they're just going to kill all of my stuff. If I have shooting, it means my opponent has to either trade shooting with me, if we've both got shooting, or they also need to rush me. And you got some pretty good shooting in the army, to be honest. So this means that your infantry is going to have more play because they can either countercharge or they can kind of charge into the midboard. So they can kind of do okay. Look how popular Gut Rippers are at the moment, and they're pretty slow. So, but I personally, if I'm spending points, I don't think I'm going to be spending points on the infantry. I'm going to be spending it on the cavalry because it's faster and it hits harder. Plus, also, I don't really want to paint 60 cohort, to be honest. But you could probably build multiple despots, multiple infantry units, and just have them fighting around. Pretty fun. But because the infantry is a little lackluster, the War Despot's a little bit lackluster. In other armies, people would be pretty mad to have him. 90 points for a dude that makes a unit fight, and then +1 attack is great. Okay, next up, we have the Ashen Elder. This is the priest in your army. The priest in your army. It's only 110 points for 6 health 4-up save. Now, 2 different powers. One, if you're near a desolation token, which is how you're going to generate your DPPs, then you're going to get +1 to your ritual points as well, making it easier to cast your prayers, sorry. And then you got Stoke Fanaticism, which gives you an area of effect to ignore the first pip of damage on each unit. And you can increase the range of this to just a measly 24 inches with enough demonic power points, which is pretty good, which means you can ignore chip damage or incidental mortal damage. Depends whether or not that's something that really matters much to you. But, because you'll have a lot of units in your army, it's not a bad shout to have. Ultimately, he gives you access to the prayer, which gives you crit mortals. It gives you +1 rend, or it gives you crit mortals. And it feels like that has to be something that is effective up to most effective. The real question is who you comboing this with. So suggestions are, because the War Despot is going to make a unit get +1 attack, so it's either going to be your cohorts, so your 2 infantry units, or even the Hobgrot Vandals, potentially give them crit mortals, give them fight simultaneous with the War Despot, and you got like 60 attacks with crit mortals. That's 10 mortal damage, which is pretty decent. But it does require you to have 2 characters at 200 points, and also get a prayer off to make that thing happen and fight simultaneously. So if you're someone who is a little lazy, right, and doesn't really want to move 20, 40, 50 dudes around, and also make sure everyone's wholly within 12 inches to make something happen, then that's really not your jam. If you're someone who's like, absolutely, you've been doing your push-ups all day and you're ready to rock, yeah, you're focused, you've done your Pilates, then maybe that combo's there. I'm going to put I'm going to put him in effective because the spell is great. The prayer is great. But the prayer is great depending on who you're going to take that prayer with, which I think really starts to like, and I might revisit some of these in a moment, but yeah, I think that's just going to go in effective. Okay, now we're going to get into the infantry. And I want to say ahead of time, I'm a little bit biased about the infantry. I think mainly, like many of you, I was a little bit perturbed that this was described as an elite army. And when I see my elite, heavily armored, although they do have a 3-up armor save, Chaos Dwarfs with only 1 health, I get a little salty. Although the points do match, because it's 100 points for the Hashutite blades and it's 110 points for the Hashutite spears. Now, their profiles are actually the same. They have a 3-up save and they have 1 wound. They've got 2 attacks each, that's 3s and 4s with 0 rend in their damage 1, but they're anti-cavalry, anti-charge, and the other ones are anti-infantry. So obviously, with a War Despot and with an Ashen Elder casting a prayer, we've got the ability to do a lot of attacks with potentially crit mortals from the Infernal cohort. The difference between the two is you give them demonic power points, 1 unit can have a 5-up ward save, which, if we just take a moment to think about that, if we have a reinforced unit of 20, that is going to be 20 health with a 3-up armor save and a 5-up ward save. And I've already said things like Urukar Tarr and the Demon Smiths are pretty good because they have that similar profile, although they're actually 15 health and can 15 health and a 3-up armor save, but they cost 320 and 350 points. And yes, I know they're also wizards and they're also a bunch of other stuff as well. But these are, you know, survivability wise, which is what their job is, because it's controlling objectives is their job, or generally just getting in the way. They're pretty good at that. They are. Would you have preferred them to have had 2 health and then cost twice as many points, a la Chaos Warriors? I think that's my main issue with what this unit is. That's my main issue with what this unit is that, but that doesn't mean this unit is not effective. I just have an issue, and it doesn't mean that it's a good issue, and it also doesn't mean that they're not a good unit, okay? But I'm just trying to say, and also in the DPP economy, you got to be really conscious about, you know, when they're cheaper, you're going to have more of the units on the board. Now, what's the difference between the two? The only difference is the type of units they're good against, and the fact that you have the ability to run 4, literally the most embarrassing rule maybe I've read in Age of Sigmar 4. And the other one, the other unit, which is why I think the cohort, who are 10 points more expensive with the spears, are slightly better, because they do give you the ability to potentially generate more demonic power points. I think if you're taking a lot of Hashutite spears, or if you're going kind of down that War Despot, Ashen Elder, or even a combined arms force, you want to generate a lot of demonic power points. And the spears give you the option to do that, which I think makes them good. Obviously, you can fight at the same time as a War Despot, and you get all the bonuses. So I'm a little hard pressed right now to say that this unit is like crazy. They're super cheap. You know, you can have, you know, 3 reinforced units of spears, which is going to be 60 health on a 3-up save, and it's only going to cost you 660 points. That's crazy. That's so good. So the points make them very effective. So they're arguably too cheap. The problem is, I think there's some sort of weird glass ceiling with this army, that when you make them more expensive, because this unit is only good because of its... these units are only good because of their cheapness, not necessarily because of like their utility. So I guess these kind of go into fine, but actually I'm going to put the blades into ineffective, which is not quite right. And I'm going to put the I might do this. This might be where I'm at. I might do that. I might put the spears up by 1 because they help you generate demonic power points. So if you're leaning into that build, that kind of works for you, which is nice. And then the actual infantry, like, I just can't see it myself. Anyway, I need you to know I'm going to this one super biased. And I think actually in the future, if people can be bothered to build and paint them, you might actually see a lot of like cohort armies do very well on the tabletop. It's just not, I just don't have the life energy for that. Like making sure everything's in range. So there we go. That's what they are. And you got to make sure you get those prayers off. You got to make sure you get the crit mortals off. Otherwise, there are a bunch of it. I'm going down. There you go. Screw these. Okay. No rend is embarrassing on Chaos Dwarfs. Okay, so we're now going to look at the Infernal Razers with blunderbusses, or as the chat have decided, they're called the Rizzlers with the bus. I don't think that's going to stick, or the Rizzlers with the bussy. So you've got 2 types of Rizzlers. You've got the Rizzlers with the bussies, and you've got the Rizzlers with the flamers. So these are 2 units of infantry, which are 5 models, reinforceable up to 10 models. This is where we really get into the sticky point of survivability, because for 100, wait, let me go find it, 110 points per 5 for the blunderbusses, and for the flamers 100 points. You're looking at about 25 points per health that's on these guys, and they've got a 4-up save, so 10 health for 220 points on a 5-up save. Now, obviously, we have a lot of units that are in the game that are kind of similar. Long strikes in their day were very effective. They were only 6 health for a very expensive unit, and they were able to do their job. And, you know, we've got things like Bolt Boys. They end up being very cheap, not a lot of health either, very squishy. So it's not like there aren't examples in the game of effective shooting units which are also very fragile, which is fair. Inside of this book, though, you have both of these 2 shooting units, and then you have 2 war machines. And if we just take a moment to look at the points, again, just the points here, the points are crazy, because for 5 blunderbusses, 110 points, but for either the rocket or the bombard artillery piece, it's 140 and 130. And if we just take a moment to look at their base profile, it's 8 health on a 3-up save. They get built-in natural rend. So we'll go back and talk about those 2 in more detail in a moment. We'll go back to these guys, though. So the way these guys get good is if you have demonic power points. Demonic power points require add to your rend. Otherwise, for 220 points, you get 10 shots, which is a great profile, 3s and 2s on the blunderbussy with 0 rend. Or for 220 points, like we said, we can get, and 3 demonic power points, we can do a rend 3. And now that's genuinely very scary. That's a genuine, very scary profile. And I think in a list, you can have 1 unit, right? Because 1 unit, you have the demonic power points to make them powerful. But you can't have multiple units. So they really taper off in their effectiveness, which I think a lot of people will say in game design and also just in army construction, they would like to see that having 1 of a unit is good, multiples of a unit. People sometimes don't like there being theme or spam, depending on how you describe it. So that's interesting. I think the blunderbussies are more interesting. They're 18-inch range. They move 4 inches. That's 22-inch range. That's good. I think 1 unit of those is very effective. I'm not going to say most effective, but I'm going to say 1 unit of those is effective, although fragile, because you can, and again, if you are trying to mess around with demonic power points and Urukar Tarr and you're taking cohorts, I think you're going to take those. When you get to the flame hurlers, they're just more difficult to use. Much more difficult, because they kind of need to be in combat. You still need to apply demonic power points. They've only got 12-inch range, although they do move 4, so it's actually 16-inch range. But they wound on 4s, but you can, again, juice up their shots. A unit of 10 is going to be 200 points for 30 shots, and you can have rend 3. That's pretty nice. And you're going to hit, like, half of the ones you hit with. So let's say you hit with everything, you're only going to wound with 15 of them. And that's not nothing, don't get me wrong, but a second unit of flame hurlers is not very effective either. Oh, I should also mention, absolutely a reason to take Infernal Razers is because they also have the ability to apply strike class onto an enemy unit with Hateful Hail. So, and again, this is once per turn army. So for me, it kind of goes the The blunderbusses are up in effective, and then the flame hurlers are down in ineffective. And because of the existence of the artillery pieces, there's a real argument that neither of them is as effective as these. And that's going to be the same conversation really for the Infernal cohorts versus the Bull Centaurs or even the Dominator engines. So yeah, I think there's definitely room for one unit of cheap blunderbusses, which is good. 210 points, put your demonic power points on them. They're going to become a major threat that your opponent is going to try and deal with and shut down. That gives you a great opportunity to control the board state, which I think is good. So yeah, they're excellent. The flame hurlers, unfortunately, although I think the flame hurlers can be good, it's just really hard to use. Also worth mentioning as well, there's a fun like heroic trait called Fire, you worms, which lets you shoot in your opponent's turn. You're only hitting on 6s. But also, obviously, with the command ability to shoot in your opponent's turn, I think the blunderbusses become very effective to just constantly apply a lot of range damage. They kind of scale quite nicely, which is quite fun. Right, so talking about those artillery pieces, you have more survivable, kind of cheaper chassis for delivering ranged output than you do with the Razers or the Rizzlers. The infantry was shooting, sorry. So you got the Tormentor Bombard, which is 4 shots damage D3, which is anti-cavalry and anti-infantry, 30-inch range. But this is 3s and 3s, rend 1. So the rend is a little sussy, but if you're shooting infantry, it's going to be rend 2. Shooting cavalry, it's going to be rend 3. Now, this is, I guess, the quote-unquote tactical piece, because you've got the ability to turn off command abilities within range on multiple different units, depending on the amount of demonic power points that you've juiced this unit up with. So that's the Bombard. And if we compare the Death Streaker Rocket, this has more output. It's shorter range, 24 inches. It can move, so it's 28 inches. And then it's hits 3 attacks, but it hits on 4s. So sad. But they wound on 2, but they're rend 2, and it's damage D3 plus 2 with anti-monster and anti-war machine. So that rend 2 is already great. And of course, shooting against monsters, it's going to be rend 3. So it's going to be, and they also have Hungering Flames, which is the ability for it to just be damage 5 once per turn army. So 3 shots. In fact, actually, in the sub-faction, it can be 4 shots if you take the battle formation. And they do have an ability that's written wrong here on the War Scroll. For every time this unit shoots, for every demonic power point it's got, every unit within combat range of that unit, roll a 3 up and it takes a mortal damage. So if for some reason you're able to get, I don't know, 9 demonic power points, which you probably aren't, you could put them onto 3 Death Streaker rockets, and you can do a lot of AoE mortals in addition to the damage that they do. What happens, though, when everything's too cheap? Well, these things are crazy cheap. The rocket's 140 and the bombard's 130. Now, I guess naturally we inherently feel like war machines do a lot of damage at range, but really all we have to do is compare them to like the Razers and see how much damage they do at range for the points cost. And unfortunately, to really make the Razers more effective, you need them to be a reinforced unit, which takes them up to like 200 or 210 points, which is much more than these. And also you need to apply demonic power points. You can just have Death Streaker rockets firing 3 shots for 140 points. I think they're 100. Rockets 140 points. 140 points, and then just doing D3 plus 2 damage at rend 2. That's pretty scary at like a big range, and they're very cheap. You can have 10 of these. It's 1,400 points. You can have a bunch of Hobgrot Vandals and a couple of characters, and you could just be doing a lot of damage long range, which isn't necessarily going to score you points, but it's going to be pretty devastating. So for ranged output, and also utility, because you've got the ability to like turn off commands, these are very good inside of the book. I think they're also good outside of the book because of how cheap they are, and that's something worth talking about as well. So I think these are better than the Razers, with I think the Rocket being the best, and the Bombard being second best. Although I think you're really arguing between a bunch of different things there. Shooting with the Bombard first, turn off command abilities, then shoot in with the rocket, so something can't all-out defense. It's very fun as well. But I think it's the important thing to note is the Razers need demonic power points to be good, and you don't need that for the rocket. They're also more survivable. So, and also they're brilliant into Gargants, and I hate Gargants, so that's amazing as well. So I think those are really interesting, and they really showcase the difference between ranged units and their effectiveness based on points. So yeah, I'm going to put them up there. Okay, so next up, we have the Bull Centaurs and the Anointed. So the Bull Centaurs are 190 points, with the Anointed being 160 points. And genuinely, 160 points for the Anointed is great. If we just take a moment to look at them, when a unit of, what do we say, they were 160, so it's going to be 320 points for a reinforced unit of Anointed. That's going to give us 18 attacks, 19, and with damage 3 on the charge, which is pretty decent. You can give demonic power points to either the Anointed or the Bull Centaurs to give you +3 to charge, right? Which is something your opponent always has to think about. And if you use Urukar Tarr with the Anointed, you can give them +3 demonic power points to give them +3 to charge, and they've got the ability to get strike first on a counter charge for your opponent. A lot of things to make Anointed Sentinels work, demonic power points, and also a CP on a counter charge, and then you've got this kind of threatening piece which your opponent's going to have to deal with. I should also note as well that both units are 4 health each, so it's either going to be 12 or 24 health on a 4-up save. For 24 health on a 4-up save on these big cavalry units, only going to cost you 320 points. That's actually pretty decent, and they can hold their own. Genuinely, if it wasn't for Bull Centaurs being in the book, you'd look at Anointed Sentinels a little bit and like have thoughts about it. But the Bull Centaurs are nutty. Like, if you have an allergy, you probably should get checked if you're watching this stream, because these have got so much nuts, it's unreal. The Bull Centaurs, I can understand why you need cowboys to rustle them up now. 4 attacks each, damage 3 on the charge, 3s rend 1, but they're crit mortals. Okay, crit mortals, and they also do like mortal damage on the charge when they charge in. Now these are much more expensive. They're 30 points more for 3, which means a reinforced unit is going to rock you 380 points. So 380 points, you start to question their survivability when it's so much of your army. But let's look at the damage output here. They're just crazy. You do have the ability to get +1 to wound from either like a trait or an artifact, one of the two, which obviously increases their output. And you can also get +1 rend from a prayer, which gives you crazy numbers. Like against a 4-up save, you're doing close to 50 damage. Okay. Which comparable to Varangard is like 15, 16 more than Varangard do when they're reinforced. Although obviously Varangard have fight twice, but they cost more points. Varangard cost more points, so you can get more of these. But even if you just all-out attack them, you're still doing 34 damage against 4-up save, right? Or 29 damage, whatever it might be. What's great about the Bull Centaurs is they require no demonic power points to activate. So if I've decided to take a unit of blunderbusses, I'm going to put all my demonic power points on them to give them rend 3. This means my Bull Centaurs don't need it, and they can just go smash. So yeah, 3 Varangard are 340 points, 6 Bull Centaurs are 380 points. It's also worth noting as well that if you take them in the right sub-faction, they can move 12 inches. If you take them with a Demon Smith on a Bull Centaur, on a Bale Taurus, they're going to get retreat and charge, so they can keep cycle charging to get that plus damage as well, so they're not constantly locked in combat. And your opponent is always going to have to play versus the idea that you could add +3 inches to their charge. So they could be moving 12 inches and they could be getting +3 inches to their charge. So these are the most effective unit for pure output in the book. They're also crazy cost effective as well. But it's the fact that they don't need to engage in the demonic PowerPoint economy and they're just flat good on their own makes them the most effective unit that's in the book. It's because you do not need to engage with just how the army wants to or should play, and you can just pop them on the board, spend points, and go smash. Now, they're not as fast as some of the other major threats that are in the game, but you can take a lot of them. And the Crit Mortals deals with a lot of issues that exist inside the game as well, which is nice. So I think they're the most effective unit in the book, and I think the Anointed go into the ineffective section. I'm sure there's some people who are like, hey, Rob, I'm going to try and make the Anointed work with the DPP and the counter charge. And as we talked about earlier, running the Hobgrots into the midboard, making those units run around, doing counter charges into them, that's super spicy. There's definitely builds where it's like, I'm taking the Flamers, I'm taking the Anointed, and I'm making a lot of stuff happen. But just from a pure brutalist perspective, those Bull Centaurs are crazy. And I expect a points hike on them very soon, because I can take 380, I can take... So just for some context, if you wanted to take 18 Bull Centaurs, that's going to set you about 1,140 points. And then a Demon Smith on Taurus, which is going to let them retreat and charge, is going to cost you 320 points, and you spent 1,460 points rise. You know, then you could take a couple of Hongbots, you know, for screening, for moving up the board, or you could take some artillery and shoot that downwind and really poke your opponent. You know, it feels good. In fact, it feels so good that maybe you just replace the Demon Smith on Taurus just with another unit of bulls. My problem is, especially with making this video, and I'm making this kind of September 2025, so if you're watching this later, don't do this in the immediate future, because likely they'll go up points in the next 3 to 6 months. But I think 2 units of 6 is a very fair kind of like purchase. I don't think you're going to be unhappy with that long term, and they're just going to be so much more effective than the Sentinels. Okay, so our last 2 units are the Dominator engine with Immolation Cannons and one with Bane Maces. Now, these are very, very cheap. 170 points for the Dominator engine with Bane Maces. This makes it comparable to our 3 Bull Centaurs. Now, the 3 Bull Centaurs have got 12 health, but they're on a 4-up save. They're going to cost 190 points, 20 points more than the Dominator engine, which is 2 health, with a 2-up save. It's only got 4 attacks. The hit on 4s, wound on 2s, a rend 1 only, but is charge +1 damage. Now, these get much better if you add demonic power points and if you fight near a hero, meaning you could fight twice with them, which is pretty spicy. Even the fact that they are just a 2-up armor save means these already prove a problem for your opponent. And actually taking multiples of these, you know, 5 as an example, which is going to cost you whatever half 1,700 is going to be a problem for your opponent to deal with, right? Because that's going to be 50 health on a 2-up save. Can your opponent get through it? Can you do enough damage with these? I guess the real problem with this unit, because the points are great. I'm just going to throw that out there. 170 points is great. And like the Razers, if I do add +3 demonic power points, well, now I'm up to 7 attacks. I'm moving an additional 3 inches. There's actually a lot of real positive elements to this for only 170 points. But I need the demonic power points to work. And as I said, the Bull Centaurs don't need any demonic power points to work or make sense, right? So these are really unlocked by demonic power points to become much more effective. When we look at the Dominator engine, these have a similar profile, or they have the same profile, and they also do the same thing, where demonic power points make these more effective. But thanks to the All Must Burn passive, if you can get this into the middle of a unit with an army with lots of different units, you can do a ton of damage. Again, though, wounding on 4s makes them a little bit inconsistent with the Immolation Cannons. So the points are really, really competitive, I'm going to say. But as I said, it's kind of interesting to end the tier list with talking about the same issue that plagues the army at the beginning. It's really the demonic power points that unlock their utility. So taking multiples of them make them not very effective. And you need to really decide that you're going to commit the demonic power points to this unit. And actually, is committing 3 demonic power points to a unit with Bane Maces as effective as just applying them to a unit of Razers? And I think the answer is no, because these just do not more damage, but they do more consistent damage at range. So I'm going to put the Bane Maces, because it's just a 2-up armor save, and that's really good. I'm going to put that as fine, and I'm also going to put the Immolation unit as fine. And now looking at it, I'm going to put them ahead of the Spears, although I think the Spears are effective. And now taking a look at the whole roster, what do I think of that overall? I think I'm going to maybe going to bring the Bale Taurus down, Demon Smith on Bale Taurus down into effective. I think that works for me. I'm happy with my 3 most effective units for what they do, which is great. I think the fact that you've got nothing in least effective down here is, you know, a testament to the book, although, you know, I'm arguable the Anointed can push down there as well. The points are competitive. That's great. You've ended up with a roster with fantastic points, although you do end up in a situation where that's really the saving grace. The problem with several of the units, like the Immolation Engine or even the Razers, the blunderbusses, is the fact that your demonic power points are rare and hard to get, and they don't scale with having multiple units. So you kind of need to have cheap points on units to make this army really effective and make sense. Otherwise, you end up with stuff that isn't good and you don't have enough demonic power points to juice them up. The Vandals are great, Bull Centaurs are great, Urukar Tarr is great. I'd be cautious about buying too many Bull Centaurs, just be careful about that. I'd also be cautious about buying too many artillery pieces, because even just adding 20 points onto each one could really start to like skew the math on that. But I think this is going to be an army that's going to be scary to play against, but it's not going to be overcooked. I don't think this is an army that's going to be like S tier. It's going to be too scary. And I think you can really build into the army the way that it wants you to play. Urukar Tarr, Spearmen, Razers, and, move demonic power points around. And I think that's kind of cool as well. But I think you can also really key into the fact that they've just made War Scrolls too cheap and do some real damage as well. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this tier list. It's a bit of an over-explained as a tier list, I think. It's kind of given me an opportunity to like re-review the book as well with more context. So I hope you've enjoyed that and given you some ideas for some like stupid lists. If you've got any idea for stupid lists in the comments below, let me know. A special shout out to the Chaos Dwarfs online subreddit. They're always some of my favorite people to talk about Chaos Dwarfs with, have been for years. So shout out to those as well. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks to everyone on Patreon supporting me. Thanks for the Twitch chat as well. This has been really fun. And I'm really looking forward to you all painting up your Chaos Dwarfs, putting them on the table and seeing them in the future because obviously it's an army that I love the most. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.